Today we're talking about harmonic analysis. What is harmonic analysis? How do we analyze chords? Hey, I'm Isaac Schanno Johnson, and if you don't know me, I'm a musician, composer, producer, and I make videos about all that fun stuff, music composition, music production, so make sure you hit that subscribe button to see videos like this in the future. How can we figure out what a chord progression is and all of that fun stuff? So let's start with the basics. That's what we're going to learn today, the basics of harmonic analysis. Why do we want to learn this? Why do we want to analyze chords? Well, it can help you identify chord progressions between different pieces of music that might be the same or similar. It'll help you hear different chord progressions as being the same thing. Now, what's a chord progression? A chord progression is basically multiple chords played one after the other. That's all it is. If you have D major to G major, that's a chord progression. One way we can look at this is by using Roman numeral analysis or harmonic analysis. And we can figure out if two chord progressions are the same thing or how they're related or similar or how they're different. We can just understand the patterns that we hear in music a little more deeply by looking at stuff through this lens. We're going to be talking about Roman numeral analysis, and in a little bit I'm going to show you how these two chord progressions, D major, A major, B minor, G major, and B flat major, F major, G minor, E flat major. I'm going to show you how those are the same chord progression. Now, hold on a minute, those aren't the same chords. How are they the same chord progression? That's what we're going to talk about. So these two chord progressions are the same chord progression, but they're in different keys. So if we take our major scale, in this case we're going to start with D major. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, and we give them all numbers. So D is 1, E is 2, F sharp is 3, and so on. Now let's build chords from each of those notes. So we're going to build triads. D major is going to be D, F sharp, A. E minor, E, G, B. F sharp minor, F sharp, A, C sharp, and so on, all the way through the scale. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is 1, so we don't need to include. This is what we're going to use because those two chord progressions are different chord progressions, but they have the same relationships between the notes. So what I mean by this is the intervals and jumps between the chords is the same. So if we take our major scale, and rather than write it as notes, we write it as intervals, we can see what I mean by this. So rather than writing it as D, F sharp, G, A, B, C sharp, D, we're gonna write it as a whole step, followed by a whole step, followed by a half step. Then we're gonna write whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. That's our major scale. And if we write this out, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, this can be used to create a major scale from any note. All 12 of the notes in our 12-tone system of tuning will work with this pattern and will create a major scale. That's how they're all related. So it might be on B flat or D, but it's still the same major scale. All right, so let's look at that first chord progression. D, A, B minor, G. And we take our numbers and all the chords that we wrote out before, and let's look at what chords we have. So we have 1, D major, 5, A major, 6, B minor, and then G major is 4. Our chord progression is D, A, B minor, G. It's also 1, 5, 6, 4. This is what some people call the 4-chord song. Now if we take that same knowledge that we just had about numbering and chords and all of those Roman numerals and everything, let's take a look at the B flat one. So we have B flat, F major, G minor, E flat. In B flat, we'll do the same thing. Here's our B flat scale. Here are our numbers. Here are all the triads built off of each of those scale degrees. Now let's look at those chords. We have 1 for B flat, 5 for F, 6 minor for G minor, and 4 for E flat. So we have the same thing, 1, 5, 6, 4. They're the same chord progression. This is what harmonic analysis can help you do. We can use this to learn different chord progressions as Roman numerals and then transpose them to all 12 keys fairly easily. Now, I do want to point out in this analysis and this type of Roman numerals, I am using uppercase Roman numerals for major chords and lowercase Roman numerals for minor chords. Now, it's not something that everybody does with Roman numerals. Some people use uppercase for all of them. I personally like this version. It's a version I learned while at Berklee College of Music, and I think it just makes it a little easier to look at right away and tell the difference between the two. What you can do with all of this information is you can figure out common chord progressions with Roman numerals. If you take, let's say, our chord progression 1, 5, 6, 4, and we put that into a different key, we could play that in G major as G, D, E minor, C. It's still 1, 5, 6, 4. It's still the same thing. You can also hear songs as being related once you can get used to what that sound is between different keys. All right, let's take a look at a couple common chord progressions that people use in songs and look at them in Roman numerals. One common one that we just talked about is 1, 5, 6, 4. So there's a video by Axis of Awesome actually that I'll link somewhere around here that you can check out that has a great example of how often this is used, right? It's used in tons and tons of songs. It's I'm Yours by Jason Mraz. It's also a song by, I think, Avril Lavigne. It's also How Far I'll Go from the Moana soundtrack. It's so many songs. It's used all over the place. Another common one is 1, 4, 5, 1. Now this is basically what a blues is, but mixed around depending on how you're playing the blues. But the blues often uses those 4 chords, or those 3 different chords, very heavily. So you have a 1 chord, a 4 chord, a 5 chord, and a 1 chord. Blues also uses, rather than just major chords, it also uses dominant 7th chords, but that's for a different video. So we'll talk about that later. So in the key of C, our 1, 4, 5, 1 would be C major, F major, G major, C major. And we could take this and move it to whatever key we want. We could move it to F major. We'd have F major, B flat major, C major, F major. We could move it to D flat major, D flat major, G flat major, A flat major, D flat major. Staying with me here? We can move it to any key and it would still be the same chord progression because the relationship between those chords is still the same. So we go up a perfect 4th, then we go up a major 2nd, and then we go down a perfect 5th. So it's still the same chord progression, and they're all major chords. So they're still the same chord progression regardless of what key we're in. So another common one is 2, 5, 1. Now, in the key of C major, we'd have D minor, G major, C major. And this one is used a lot in jazz. If we look at Giant Steps by Coltrane, it's basically 2, 5, 1s all over the place. But what he does that makes it so cool is that he moves these around into a whole bunch of different keys. So rather than just having 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 5, 1 in the key of B flat major over and over and over again, over until the song is over, rather than having 2, 5, 1 over and over and over again until the song's over in the same key like B flat major, he changes it up. So he switches from one key to another. He moves that key center around and has a bunch of 2 5s and a bunch of 2, 5, 1s in all of these different keys that get moved around and rotated. And you feel like you're kind of changing key all over the place because he's doing this exact same chord progression. That's one great thing that you can do with harmonic analysis is you can see that all of these chord progressions are the same. You can look at something like Giant Steps and rather than seeing, oh my gosh, I don't know what all of these chords are, I don't know what scales to use because he's going all over the place, what's going on? Rather than getting all anxious about what is going on in the music and you don't know all these scales and you can't change all these scales so quickly, you can see that there's a pattern. You can see that it's a bunch of 2, 5, 1s. Now, that doesn't necessarily make it any easier to solo over because it's still really fast and changes key all the time. But you don't have to think of each separate chord as being its own unique thing. You can look at it as sort of chunks. It can also help you look at certain patterns within songs, right? One other thing you can do with harmonic analysis is analyze, is there a 5-1 that's out of a key? Let's say you have, in the key of C major, you have C, F, D major, G major, A minor. That's our chord progression. So we have 1, 4, 5 of 5, 5, 6 minor. So that one's weird because we have this 5 of 5. What in the world is that? Well, that means that we have a 5 chord in the key of a different scale. Staying with me here? So we have D major in the key of G major is chord 5. It's the 5th chord, 5th scale degree. And we don't have a D major chord in the key of C major. We have a D minor chord. But we can see that we have that 5-1 relationship in this song because we know Roman numeral analysis. Now this gets pretty crazy because you might have some chords that are just called flat 2 major, or sharp 4, minor 7, flat 5, or flat 6 major, right? You might just have certain chords that are certain things. It's simple in some ways, but it's also a little different in some ways because you might have a whole chord progression that's in a different key. For example, let's go back to giant steps. We have 2 5s in all these different keys. You might have a chord progression that's 2 5 1 in a different key, and then you go back to the original key. So one way you might see this is, let's say you have C major 7, then F major 7, then E minor 7, A dominant 7, and then G minor 7. Now what we just did was 1 4 2 5 in the key of D, and then we added 2 chord. So we didn't just have 1 4 3 minor 6 major 2, we had 1 4 2 5 of 2 to 2. So we had this relationship between these chords that's out of a key briefly and then comes back to the original key. One other thing that you can do with harmonic analysis is look at different modes of the major scale. So let's say we have the minor scale. In that one, we can just number them the same, but people often, rather than talking about 3 in minor, you'll say flat 3, because you want to point out that in minor, the 3rd scale degree is flatted compared to the major scale. So let's look at what this is so that we can visualize it. We'll have the C minor scale, C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat, and then C again. Compared to the major scale, we would have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, right? E natural, A natural, B natural. Now if we look at those two and we compare them, we can see the 3rd, 6th, and 7th scale degrees are flatted. This is how we make a minor scale. Build our chords up, build our triads. And then we can see what our Roman numerals are for the minor scale. We can see that our Roman numerals change. We have a flat 3 major. We have a flat 6 and a flat 7 major. We have a 4 minor. 5 is a little weird because, well, in lots of music, people just change the 5 chord to be a dominant 7 chord or a major chord, regardless of whether you're in minor or major. Often people just do that because it sounds a little more resolved and it's a bit stronger of a resolution than having 5 minor 1. So those are some of the basics. Now, a common chord progression in minor is 1 minor to 4 minor, back to 1, or 1 minor to flat 6 major, back to 1. Or we have a 1 4 5, but we have 1 minor, 4 minor, 5 major, 1. Now we changed that chord a little bit because it has a stronger resolution. Another common chord progression is 1 minor, flat 6 major, flat 7 major, 1. So all of these chord progressions are different chord progressions that you can hear, that you can pay attention to. All right, so how can we get better at this? How can we learn to hear all this stuff? Well, take a song that you're learning on your instrument or that you like, figure out the chords, and write it as Roman numerals. That's a start. Once you do that for a number of songs, you'll start seeing patterns. Honestly, when you do this, you probably won't even start seeing patterns when you write them down. You'll probably start hearing those patterns before you even have to write them down, right? Once you get the idea of what a 1 to 4 change is, you'll hear that all over the place. Once you get used to what a 5-1 chord progression sounds like, or a 5-1 change, you'll be able to hear that all over the place. Same with 2-5-1, or 1-4-5-1, or 1-5-6-4, like the 4-chord song. So use this as a way to learn music and learn it more generally than just, these are the chords for this specific song and that's how they are. This song is this other thing, it's a completely different thing. You can look at the relationships between those songs and more generally look at the patterns people use in music. Now this only applies to tonal music and to music that has functional harmony, but that's a whole other thing that we're going to talk about in another video, so don't worry about that for now. So that's a starting off point for how you can use harmonic analysis. I love doing this with songs because it helps you see everything a little more generally. It also helps if you ever have to transpose songs on the spot. You can think of them as Roman numerals and then apply that to the new key rather than having to transpose everything up in the same direction. So if you're looking at whatever chord progression you are and you need to play it in this other key, you can then use your Roman numeral analysis in your head to shift into that new key without having to rethink the entire thing. It helps a lot with learning music and seeing patterns in music and understanding music and hearing music a little more deeply, because you're hearing the patterns not just within one song, but as they relate to this larger idea of the major scale or this larger idea of chord progression. Another thing you can do with this is use it to learn more chord progressions, which sounds weird, but stay with me. So if you use this to learn one common chord progression, then you take that common chord progression and apply it to a different song. See if you can hear how that other chord progression relates. This is basically how I passed my college ear training exams on harmonic analysis. I would learn chord progressions for songs and learn the Roman numerals for them, and then play them in different keys to really get an idea of what that chord progression sounds like. And then when the exam came around, they played the chord progression, and I could say, oh yeah, cool, that's the same as this Jason Mraz song I was just playing on guitar last week. Or whatever chord progression it was, I can hear that it's related to these other songs that I know and hear. It can also help you in learning music, because rather than just looking at chords and seeing all of these chords and you don't know how they're all related, and there's way too many chords and you don't know what to do. Rather than seeing all of these chords and you don't know what to do because there's way too many of them and you don't know how they're all related, you can see how they're all related, and you can remember that relationship a little more than just remembering those specific chords. So it'll help you learn music more because you'll see more patterns with the music, right? This is kind of what you always want to do when you're learning something, is relate it to something you already know, because then you can scaffold to it. You can think, how is this similar to something I already know? How can I understand this more easily? And then use your scaffolding to figure out, oh, this is this chord progression that's similar to this other song. Oh, but it has this other change and it goes to this other key for a little bit almost, but it's not really. Okay, now I understand it. You can kind of scaffold to it and latch onto it in a different way than just rote memorization. So that's it for this video. I hope you found it useful. I hope you learned something about music. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Peace.